Welcome to the Loyal Opposition Podcast. I'm Bernie Flowers, one of Uncle Sam's wayward children. I believe that our country's best days are still in front of us, but if those best days are to come, we need to change the direction of the country now, before it's too late. I intend to talk about important issues and topics every week in hopes of helping to improve our country and our way of life. Please like, share, and subscribe. Elect me to Congress. I can make a difference for all Americans, and especially Marylanders. Guest for episode 56 is Lieutenant Colonel Scott Willens. Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Scott Willens received his bachelor's degree in animal science from Rutgers University in 1992. He received a doctorate in veterinary medicine from the University of Minnesota in 1996, with externships at the Minnesota Zoo and the Gabbert Raptor Center, a veterinary internship in aquatic animal medicine and research from Mystic Aquarium in 1999, and a Ph.D. in Comparative Biomedical Sciences from North Carolina State University in 2005. Immediately after the events of September 11th, 2001, Dr. Willens joined the United States Army Veterinary Corps and retired with 20 years of active service as of 2022 as a lieutenant colonel. He deployed to Iraq in 2007 on an embedded provincial reconstruction team to assist agricultural communities in Babil Province and veterinarians at the Baghdad Zoo. In 2013, Dr. Willens became a Diplomate of the American College of Veterinary Preventive Medicine, and he's a member of the American Veterinary Medical Association, the American Association of Zoo Veterinarians, and the International Association for Aquatic Animal Medicine. His expertise includes avian, exotic, aquatic animal medicine and surgery, pharmacology, toxicology, preventive medicine, and public health. Dr. Willens is a co-founder and partner at Neighborhood Veterinary Associates in Clarksburg, Maryland. Dr. Willens holds a third-degree black belt in taekwondo and sings lead vocals for the 80s rock cover band Weird Science. Scott happens to be of Jewish descent. He's also my trusted friend. He's one of our show's returning champions. Scott, how have you been?
Great, Bernie. News notwithstanding, which is kind of what we're going to talk about, but this is my guest today is Leonidas. He's a rescue, little under 3 years old. Had a fractured femur when someone threw him out of a car, but he's a very sweet dog and loves pretty much everybody, very snuggly.
He looks like a handsome fellow.
He's good, yeah.
I like the name, too.
The Brave 300.
There you go. Well, brother, I got some questions for you.
Yeah.
I think the people are going to want to know what you have to say. So without any further ado, can we start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's do it. As a person of Jewish ancestry and a military officer, I value your perspective on what's happening in the world. You know that. We've talked extensively. Specifically, what's happening from a Jewish perspective. So tell me about all these anti-Israeli protests, and they seem to be popping up all over the country, especially at college campuses. What's going on?
This is apparently supposed to be a protest for what the radical left in their unholy alliance with radical Islam feels is an apartheid state of Israel without any integration of the real facts and history as well as the current events, completely negating the events of October 7th, where there was a ceasefire prior to that. There is no occupation of Gaza. Gaza was ceded back to the Gazans back in early 2000s, just as the Sinai was to Egypt in 1979 for a simple piece of paper and a handshake. And since that time, the Gazans, through their elected Hamas, have used that territory to continuously attack Israel, fire rockets brought to you courtesy of Iran. And so this is a lot of history revisionism. We've seen it throughout the past few months. Since it's been over 6 months now, almost 7, and we know that the rocket that hit the hospital was actually a failed Hamas rocket, again courtesy of Iran, that actually hit the parking lot and didn't kill anybody. But of course, Israel was blamed, and they used a lot of old footage from Syria from a decade prior to try to show that Israel was indiscriminately killing civilians, when in fact Israel goes above and beyond what any other country in this world does to minimize human casualties and collateral damage, while Hamas tries to maximize it. And then more recently, we heard rumblings of a mass grave, which was actually 30 Hamas martyrs that were buried months ago and then exhumed for the purposes of propaganda. So there's a lot of misinformation. These protests involve some students. And I was just talking about this the other day with family, and I think some of the underlying impetus for some of these protests has been these are post-COVID students. They were in high school and middle school during COVID, and now they're in college, but they have all of this pent-up rage about being locked down, and they also have lost key socialization skills that you learn in a high school and a college setting that you require as a life skill throughout the rest of your life, and they're lacking in some of that socialization. They're very stunted, so they're even more easily influenced by their professors who are involved in this as well, radical left professors, and we've seen even Bill Ayers and reemerge, who's a known terrorist from the Weather Underground. Sami Al-Arian, who was let go from University of Florida. His wife showed up at one of these protests. So there's a lot of the ivory tower academia that's getting involved in influencing students, but a lot of outside agitators also, and a lot of money is going towards this. We've seen not only uniformity in the tentage that these folks are using in their encampments, but also even the coolers, the signs, everything has a dollar value attached to it. And this is being funded by Soros, the Rockefellers, the Ford Foundation, and Hamas itself in Iran. So this is really just a resurgence of the intifada on our own soil, and a divestment. And it's concerning. I have one child still in college now, goes to a school in Maryland that I won't say, but thankfully it's smaller, and they haven't had any issues on the campus, and I don't feel that they will. We see throughout the country a lot of the campuses that are experiencing these encampments are allegedly the creme de la creme, the Ivy League, and schools such as that, including my alma maters, Rutgers and Minnesota and NC State. They're cowering to these students. They're wanting to meet with them about their demands, and they're nothing more than domestic terrorists that should not be negotiated with at all. This should have been dealt with much earlier, but I know that's probably in some follow-up questions, so I'll get to that. These have to stop. It's very concerning, because this is reminiscent of what was seen in Nazi Europe, in Austria, the University of Vienna in 1938, where Jewish students were blocked from going on the campus. And we've seen students physically blocked and beaten up from going on campus. One student was stabbed in the eye with the Palestinian flag, people chanting, "Go back to Poland, go back to the gas chambers." This is not tolerable free speech. Free speech does not allow you to call for the death to America. And when they say this, you have to listen to them. They're serious. You have to take them at their word when they say death to America and death to Israel and Jews. This is what they intend to do on a global scale, and certainly here we saw George Washington dressed up in a keffiyeh at GW a couple of days ago, and screaming for the Intifada, which is the destruction of not only Israel but of Jews worldwide. We're seeing these petulant, entitled, new wave Hitler youth arising on these campuses with the assistance of outside agitators, but they're supposed to be in school for learning, and private schools have every right to establish rules for what speech is acceptable in their decorum. And it's not a free speech situation when you're on private ground, and you're certainly not allowed to occupy those spaces and preclude other people. When your right to free speech or your right to assembly or any right ends when your fist gets to my nose. And when you're keeping other folks from being able to assemble, to go to class, to get to any space on these campuses, intimidation, certainly the looting and graffiti and destruction of property, but also, even we talk about private, but on a public university, or any public space, you have to have a permit to assemble and do that kind of thing. And again, you have to abide by certain rules when you're in that space, which they've violated violently time and again, including attacks on police. And the ones who get hurt the most in these kind of scenarios are the police. My biggest concern here is that what we're going to see will be reminiscent of the Kent State massacre, where 4 were killed. But when you peel the onion layer back a couple of layers, which most people don't care to do in their short attention span theater, you'll see that the students there were attacking the ROTC students and burning their building and attacking police. And I mean, that's which eventually people have the right to self-defense and to put down what is really an insurrection in this country.
There you go. So, I got another question for you. You ready?
Ready?
This is along the same lines. You kind of mentioned it a little earlier, but let's go in. These protests appear to be coordinated. What do you think about all that?
Well, of course, I don't hold my security clearance anymore. I did hold it for 20 years in TSSCI, but I know how to read between the lines. I know what's obvious. I know what I'm hearing from the experts on this is that it is coordinated. But you to be able to synchronize this across so many universities, the money that's involved, it has to be coordinated, and it's from folks that want to foment dissent and violence through any and to have their way through any means possible, or even just to tear down the system. We've seen this with George Soros before. We know a lot of these folks literally are the same people that were discovered in Antifa and BLM protests in the last few years, and they just latch on to another cause, but they're all related. It's all about bringing down capitalism, about meritocracy, about the United States. These spoiled brats are complaining about how they're going to starve to death and and die of thirst, and just leave the campus and go get some food. But they want humanitarian aid delivered to them, and not one of them is a humanitarian.
There you go.
It's definitely a coordinated effort, and I just hope it doesn't metastasize to my son's school, to all the other schools that are standing up to this. I've been encouraged to see students at my Rutgers stand up and sing the national anthem and try to forge through. Students at Columbia blocking, a couple of really brave students trying to block the mob from getting into the building that they destroyed. At NC State, another one of my alma maters, where they re-raised the American flag and they're singing the national anthem, and a lot of those kids are getting a lot of money for their fraternity. I'm worried about my fraternity, Sigma Alpha Mu, which is a Jewish fraternity. my chapter at Rutgers was about half, but there were some that are considerably more, and historically it was an all-Jewish fraternity. Sigma, A Pi is another one, and there's sororities as well, and Hillel, Chabad, other organizations on campus that are going to be easily targeted. It has nothing to do with what someone's name is or their appearance or whether they're wearing a yarmulke or whatever. They're going to be targeted for it, and I've had this discussion too with family where it's kind of like the Predator movies. You remember those?
Yeah.
Where you know the Predator's out there, and some people say, well, keep your head down, don't get involved, don't get embattled with these people. But it doesn't matter what you do. Just like with the Nazis, it doesn't matter how much you embrace being Jewish or not. The point is that you are, and you will be persecuted or slaughtered for it. So you might as well embrace it. Getting back to the Predator analogy, he's out there, so you kind of cover yourself in mud to hide your heat signature because he sees an infrared. Mm-hmm. And then you remember in the second movie, he realized something's up and he just switches to ultraviolet or some other spectrum, and he's going to hunt you no matter what you do. So make a stand, stand up to it. I've been encouraged by some local politicians as well, including Chris Tomlinson, who I ran against for delegate a couple of years ago, and Senator Reedy. And, that's under the bridge. You may be a competitor with somebody, but when they're in office and you like how they're managing things on pretty much every issue, and particularly this one, and all the people down in Annapolis, they're leading the charge against anti-Semitism in support of Israel, and they've been attacked not only on their political pages, but on their personal pages. So I'm not going to mention names, but you can go to their pages and see for yourself that they've been attacked personally for their support and called fascists and that kind of thing. So I've defended them on their pages, and for that. For my having done that, I had a woman recently about half my age, Jen Zier, foreign national, who took me to court for a peace order because she didn't like my responses, even though she was saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which calls for the destruction of Israel and my people, and other blatantly anti-Semitic things that she said. And thankfully, this is in Howard County, it was thrown out of court. The judge said there's no basis for this. You may not like everything that Dr. Willens says. I may not like everything Dr. Willens says, but this is on the delegates page. It's protected speech. You're saying nasty stuff too, and when people push back, you can't just take them to court because you don't like what they're saying. So thankfully that was thrown out. But I wouldn't compare myself to Trump and his persecution, but you can see how lawfare works. The battle is everywhere, and if I think we talked about this the last time I was on, where I tried to get into the Israeli army, and I'm a little too old and broken maybe, and I don't speak fluent Hebrew, so they didn't take me. But there's other fights right here. I went to the march in Washington with Dave Wallace, who's running for District 2 for House of Representatives, and some other friends, and speaking out when and where I can. But there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of nastiness on social media, and things that these people I doubt would say to my face.
I doubt it.
I don't think they'd say it. They're really emboldened and brazen there, and in real life maybe they would, but then the translation there is now they're wearing a mask. Yeah. And they're really so concerned in these huge groups that they form in totally unsanitary third world conditions in these encampments. And if you're worried about COVID, just don't even go to that. You're going to wear a mask because of that. Give me a break. You're hiding. You don't want to have it ruined. If you're going to stand by it, and look at me. Yeah. So, but I wear this outside my shirt. I had someone call me an effing kike in Silver Spring back in November, wearing the Star of David out there. I wear this bigger one that's made of woolly mammoth tusk, fossilized, that I got in Alaska. That's a big one. And it's like in your face. and they're not going to silence me ever. Not going to happen. My grandmother fled Nazi Europe before the Holocaust, and she didn't do that, and I didn't serve, and you didn't serve all those years that we did to put up with this BS. I'm not going to do it. If something happened at my son's school, I'm going to be there in 20 minutes. I don't, even if it's not at his school, it happens in McDaniel and Westminster. I'm not going to tolerate that stuff here. Nobody should. Good on those guys. And where was that? Where they pushed back? UCLA, where you had a bunch of pro-Israel folks that went in and tried to tear down the encampment. The police love the police. They're not being allowed to do their job. Just like Border Patrol isn't being allowed to do their job, keeping these wackos out and even getting to our campuses. Because believe me, they're filtering in that way too. But people are going to take stuff into their own hands because we're not going to have. Otherwise, we're going to have the purge. Sleepy Joe isn't doing a thing. He's draws moral equivalence between it. We're not going to have Islamophobia or that kind of thing. I'm sorry. Look, I've volunteered to serve and help the Muslim world, and you've done that, which is more than most people would do, and lift a finger or risk anything to help the Muslim world. But if you don't have some Islamophobia for fear of what Islam can and is doing to this country, in a radicalized sense, you're not awake. And I don't mean woke, like that's grammatically ridiculous. I mean, you're not awake. You're not seeing what's going on. And someone wants to call me that, that's fine. You can call me that. I'm going to keep my guard up. I'm going to do it for me and for my kid. And as much as I don't want to see suffering in Gaza either, I got my son in this hand. I got all the kids there in the other hand, and any parent that doesn't weigh like this is either disingenuous or lying, or they're not worth spit as a parent. You have to prioritize, and I don't want to see any kids suffering, but at the same time, these kids are being indoctrinated there, they're being indoctrinated here, and the kids that were indoctrinated 30 years ago that nothing happened to are now the ones committing the atrocities. So do I really lose sleep over, the fog of war and things that have happened? Not much. Not until those hostages are returned. Not until Hamas is eradicated. And talking about hostages, you had 3 custodial staff at NYU, at Columbia, that were held hostage by the students. And
that's terrible.
That's not even scratching the surface. You have tens or hundreds of thousands of Jewish students being held hostage on our own campuses. Crazy. And the people that support them and the Christians of faith who stand by us, they're being held hostage to these savages. I'm not going to pull punches or mince words.
Savages is a good word, and I have very little respect for those that are apathetic, because we got a civilization change coming here unless we step up, and I think we're being challenged. But I got another question for you. How can we stop all this craziness on the college campuses?
Multifaceted response. Should never have been allowed to get to this. The encampment should never have been allowed to be set up. These bases and entrenched, fortified spaces for the radicals should never have been allowed to flourish and propagate all over the country. And Biden hasn't said anything until yesterday.
Yeah.
Weeks have gone by with this nonsense. Trump was lambasted for not speaking up quickly enough on January 6th, which he actually did. Biden hasn't said anything, and when he does, it's a moral equivalence argument. So he's sending the signal because he's afraid to come out. He's afraid to lose votes in Dearbornistan and Little Mogadishu, Minnesota. So he's not saying anything. Plus, his underlying sentiment about things is that he's racist and anti-Semitic anyway. You've heard the comments he's made about black people. We know, with the Obama White House, the people that he met with in the past, like Father Flager and Farrakhan and Al Sharpton and other race hustlers. these it's completely consistent. And am I worried about anti-Semitism from the right as well? Of course I am. There's wackos I've dealt with online and that I hear in the media. Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, the Hodge twins, I'm done with them. And so are so many Jews for the things that they've said. But that's not where the entrenched anti-Semitism is. Like, people talk about institutionalized racism or institutionalized anti-Semitism. It's in the Democrat Party. It's in the unsuppressed squad of the lunatics running the asylum of the Democrat Party. And Jews that don't realize that or aren't awake are part of the problem, because they vote these people in and they're not standing up, and they will continue in their Trump derangement syndrome to bash Trump and say it's his fault. The difference between Trump and the leftist Jew is that Trump's grandchildren are Jewish. People have mentioned, well, what he met with so-and-so at the White House and Kanye, stupid stuff. I look at the wealth of Trump's statements and actions and sentiment concerning Israel, concerning Netanyahu and Jews, and moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, finally, the support and the moral clarity and lack of ambiguity that Trump has concerning that. He's the only thing that's going to save it. So people like Rappaport, who speaks out very well when it comes to anti-Semites, and then on the other hand, within the same breath, is blasting Trump. Like, you got to stop with the cognitive dissonance and reconnect those decussating fibers in your brain and have them talking left hemisphere talking to right hemisphere again. It's and when it comes to the demands of these students and wanting to divest from Israel's investing in these universities. We rely on Israel for intel, for technology that these students have no idea, but all of the money from Israel that's going to the universities as well. So you want to talk about divestments? Israel should just cut them off. And not to mention the greater Israel, all the Jews here in the United States, and we always get blamed, oh, Jews control the media, Jews control the banks. I wish I had that kind of money and popularity. Okay, I'm doing all right, but but they're going to find out if we divest in the universities. That's going to be where it really hurts. And they have to. We've seen billionaires and multimillionaires who are Jewish pull their money, and that's got to happen. And these students have to be expelled. They have to be expelled, and I mean, you have the right to protest. You don't, like I said, you don't have the right to say or do certain things. But that said, the non-citizens, all these foreign nationals at the schools that we don't even vet out their visas before they come here, they don't have constitutional rights. It's not the Constitution of the third rock from the sun. It's a Constitution of the United States. And if you're not a citizen, it doesn't apply to you. So you're protesting, you're spending, our time and dime that we've invested in your foreign country, specifically China, and you're here causing trouble. Not only are you expelled, you're going to get deported. Get out of my country.
I like the sound of that. That's a pretty good, solid recommendation.
So, we should have put the brakes on it before. We have to put the brakes on it now. And none of this, the police have been so restrained. I'm silently hoping for like water cannons and stuff to just push these people out and teach them. There needs to be a hard lesson learned that resonates nationally, that if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And you have some places like Florida with DeSantis who's doing that, and Texas, but it's got to be everywhere. I saw that. I think it was a trooper pick up a student who's screaming, "Ow, you're hurting me!" And he picks him up like a screaming, fetching kid, or picks him up.
Yep, helped him away.
Oh,
that was pretty funny.
But there's just, I don't wish for anything catastrophic. I'm just hoping that the whatever does happen and the examples that are made of the students, of their careers and their futures, has a ripple effect, just like, a tidal wave, just like these encampments have had. and that there's more pro-Jewish and pro-Israel rallies out there to counter this and show that the silent majority is not going to be silent about this. And you can't, because like Pastor Niemöller said in his poem about first they came for the Jews and the homosexuals, and that, the canary in the coal mine is, we're going to be ferocious canaries this time, as I've said before, but you don't want the dominoes to fall, and it's going to be you next.
There you go. They don't protest like this in their own home countries because that would not be tolerated.
No, they can't.
Okay, let's do this last question and get you out of here because our bandwidth isn't holding up. Scott, the floor is now yours, good sir. Talk to the people. Tell them what you want them to hear. Tell them what's on your mind.
Yeah. Yesterday started early voting for the primary election. You got choices out there. You got, for District 3, you got Bernie is the clear choice for his service, his understanding of national security, his solidarity with Jews and with everybody, his sense of dignity and equality for everyone without it being some kind of mandated training. And thank God we don't have to do mandatory annual training anymore, but it's innate and ingrained in you and me anyway. But exercise that vote. Go in person. If you are going to request a mail-in ballot, deliver it by hand to the Board of Elections, and do it as early as possible, because that way nobody can take your vote from you. But from everyone from school board and city councils, when other people are standing up for you and carrying that banner, don't let them fall, get their back. Whether it's, Delegate Tomlinson and Senator Reedy or anyone else in Annapolis, and that could be of both political parties. I've seen quite a bit surprisingly from Fetterman in Pennsylvania, my favorite Democrat now. It can be anybody, but you have Fetterman doing that, and when Schumer and Bernie Sanders and Nadler are what we refer to as capos or Judenrat or Ginos, Jews in name only. Wow. So, support. I told you, I'm not pulling punches. These are self-loathing Jews who think that if they apologize and appease at the altar of the cult of multiculturalism, that it's going to make them last for the gas chamber. But they're still going to go. So, I'm grateful, as I said, for Christians of faith who know the history, know the current events, and the vast discrepancies and cultural emphases of Israel and its neighbors. And, you shouldn't have to fight that fight for us alone. So I would call on folks to remember at the polls this week and coming up in the primary and in the general election that exactly what's at stake. And there's a lot of fear mongering, and people might claim that this is as well, but you're seeing it. This is not largely peaceful protests. Neither was Antifa or BLM, but you're seeing, but it is. It's Marxism married to Islamofascism, and it has to stop now, or we will be unfortunately living Reagan's fear of what can happen very quickly in a generation, and our children will listen to us telling stories of how America used to be and how it once was great. So make it great again.
There you go. Scott, how can people get a hold of you if they need to?
They can do it through Facebook. I still have my delegate/city council page. I didn't win against the swamp. That's okay. There's other ways to win. A lot of friends, a lot of contacts, a lot of organizations. I'm part of the Tri-District Republican Club as the vice president of that, and the Carroll County Veteran Independence Project. So lots of good things come, however it falls, whatever side of the fence, you have to declare a win, and maybe I'll do something again. But for now, I like helping folks like you get where you're going, because you really hold the light for us and illuminate through the coming darkness. But they can reach me through that, or certainly through Neighborhood Veterinary Associates if it's related to clinical matter with your pets. Not to blast me for something I said on here politically. That's not legal.
No, I wouldn't do that to you.
Yeah, not you. Yeah, or yeah, I think the best way is probably through Facebook Messenger.
There you go. Well, brother, that's about it. You know, this is your second time on my program, and whenever something comes up what I know that you have expertise on, you're going to get a phone call.
Thanks. I'm sorry if it was a little more raw and less polished, but I thought this topic deserved that because it's not something to be constrained about. I mean, yeah, you don't want to have emotions get away from you, but at the same time, we're not automatons and we shouldn't be expected to. And that's that ridiculous double dichotomous standard that liberals have. If you get upset about something and you're legitimately upset because it's objectively infuriating, then you're triggered. And none of them have psych degrees, by the way. But if you don't show any expression about it, then you don't care, or you're an automaton. So you got to strike that balance sometimes, or just don't care what they think at all.
Wallflowers are not what we are, bro. Look, I've taken up enough of your time. I thank you for coming on the program, as always. And as I said before, whenever something comes up that I know you got expertise in your vast repertoire of experience, you know I'm going to call. You take care,
Bernie.
brother.
Best of luck.
Thank you, brother.
Going for you.
That's about it for now. This has been the Loyal Opposition Podcast, produced in association with Liberty Arise Media, Fallback Productions, and other podcasters. I ask that you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Be sure to get your copy of my book, Black Values Matter, available as an ebook on Amazon, Audible, and Apple Books. And also remember that I'm running for Congress in Maryland's 3rd District. We have the best chance to win in a generation, and I intend to do just that. Check me out at flowersformaryland.com or on most social media. And lastly, it's okay to disagree, but if you want our country to prosper, we must insist on unity, transparency, and civility from ourselves and our fellow citizens. Thanks for listening to the Loyal Opposition Podcast. I'll see you next week.